Good day, Market Chameleons, and everyone joining for the first time. Thanks for coming by and watching the Market Chameleon After Hours show. Where we're going to be unveiling real-time option strategies with Ryan Mastro from OptionsRobot. Before we get started, let's take a look at the options disclaimer. Please be aware that neither Market Chameleon, myself, Ryan, OptionsRobot, our options investment advisors, or broker dealer. We do not make recommendations for any securities or derivative instruments. Everything is for informational purposes only concerning Market Chameleon tools and products and OptionsRobot's tools and products. With that, one last look at the disclaimer, and let's welcome Ryan Mastro to the show. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing well. Yourself? How was your weekend?
Good. Everything's great. And you?
Busy. Got a little burnt. Got a little color. A little more than I want to.
You at the shore, or where were you?
Yeah, I actually was down in Avalon with my wife's family came down, so I got stuck down there for a little longer than I expected, and probably should have put on more lotions. Put it that way. So it's all good.
Jersey Shore is always fun.
It's like it's one of those ones where you start to turn a little bit. It hurts. You're like, oh, that's.
That's a little bit too much time in the sun for sure. So
yeah,
what are we seeing today?
So market-wise, let's just look. So right now, you can see on my screen, I got the Qs up here, and we've had this little bit of a pullback in terms of, kind of the market feeling a little bit kind of, I don't want to say overbought, but giving a little bit back, right? It's not the end of the world. You look at something like the SPY, we had maybe slightly better, right? You can see kind of how we're settling in here in terms of, near this kind of breakout level. So, I mean, look, we're definitely due for a little bit of pullback here in terms of, where this could go. I think the one anomaly that kind of still steps out or kind of stands out to me would be the IWM. We had this kind of broadening out last week where the small caps really took hold, and you can see the entire broader market came in. CPI was a little bit lighter, and we got a little excited, and then obviously PPI hit on Thursday, so we kind of just stagnant in here, and it just didn't do much. But still holding the strong kind of move there. You look at the thing I mentioned before was the RSP, which is the equal weight, and you can see that same kind of push with that. That basically gives us an idea of what the broader market is doing, how many stocks are moving up versus basically sitting here stagnant. And clearly we had a nice push in that. So that's a good sign. Now, we don't want to see this roll back over and give it all back. That would mean that we start to lose some of that breath in terms of a lot of these bigger weighted names in terms of holding that. So, a couple of things that stood out to me. Obviously, today we had NVIDIA that was trying to get going, and we kind of closed right at the resistance level. So that's one I'm definitely going to be watching. We are going to have earnings in this, I believe, next week. So that's definitely on the radar. We had PANW tonight. In terms of earnings, this is was trading about 184 in the after hours. So that's going to be somewhere around up in here, around that 200, 100, and then it's trying to get back into the gap fill here. So that's going to be very interesting how the market maybe starts to handle their conference call. So that's going to be on my radar for first thing tomorrow. But let's get back over to the Chameleon platform and look at a couple different things. Again, I'm always trying to come in here and look for trade ideas. Obviously, you click on the trade ideas, and there's so much information that you can start to work your way down through. I love the seasonality. I started to come through that and start to click through a couple of these names. Again, NVIDIA's right on there. Meta had a big pullback today. AVGO had a little pullback. Taiwan Semi I thought was very interesting on the chart. So let's come back over here and look at the chart on that one real quick. Taiwan Semi I think is one. It could go either way. Whoops, sorry, bad typing on my part. TSM, there we go. And I think you're kind of right in this zone. Let me zoom this in for you guys a little bit more, make it, there we go. So you can see a little bit better. But we're kind of right in the middle of this zone. And I think this is going to be one, maybe not a trade for today, but if we can get the semi starting to go again, this is really in a pretty good consolidation. So you could use something like the low of this area or the top of this area. Obviously, we just talked about NVIDIA. If NVIDIA starts to go, then Taiwan Semi is going to go, right? There's so many different names in that space. Another one I liked in here was NXPI that I thought was very interesting on the chart. You're getting up the resistance area in here, right? So this one's on my radar. And was my other one? We had Qualcomm I thought was interesting on the chart that was kind of getting up to getting a little bit toppy, but has not really been able to breach this area. So definitely gonna be watching that. It did break the 200 last week and been able to hold it. So I think out of those, I'd probably say NXPI, probably one of the better ones up near the highs here. The only problem with that is the options are a little expensive. You're talking about a $230 stock, and you look at trading the options on that. And this is where I think it's very hard for traders to figure out what to jump into. And I'll give a very easy rule of thumb for me is if I can get a 2-for-1 in terms of the movement of the stock to the option price, then I'm going to be interested in it. So for example, if I'm looking at this option right now, at the money's roughly $4. We're trading, no, I'm sorry, this is AMD. Let me go over to NXPI. So, didn't do it again. NXPI. So NXPI, we were trading like $230. So 227s are at the money. That's again $750 for an option this week, probably a little bit expensive, but is it really? So if you go over back to our charts and look at this, we can add in an average true range. So what I mean by 2-to-1 would be if I come back and say if I add in my average true range, I would want this to be moving about $15 a day, right? So I'm paying $750 for my options, but if I can get that $15, that's 2 times the movement versus my option price. So right now I'm moving only about $7.30, right? So to me, that is clearly not worth it. Whoops. When I come back to trade, option chains, NXPI, and you can see the at the money's probably a little too expensive for my taste when you're trading around $7, right? So something like that, not going to be in the wheelhouse for me. So I would probably go back to something like even an NVIDIA if you want to play it for this week and say if we can break out from that high, right, or from this level. So let's look at this in terms of the comparison, and we'll look at the at the money's in here. You're $182. It's $2.33. So I'd be looking for something like $5 of movement in NVIDIA. And we'll just type that in real quick, NVDA. Oh, it didn't save my template. So I go back over here to my average true range, and I'm moving about $4.13, right? So still a little bit expensive in terms of the options. But let's say we do want to jump into something like this. So let's say we want to, let's look at some of these highs in here. I'm not really giving you guys a really good looking chart. Let me just zoom out a little bit and get it, get a little more context in here. So you guys can see this and see some granularity on this one. All right, so that now we're kind of sitting in here. We got a couple different highs. We have the close over in here. I'd be looking at probably something like that close right there. That's 182.70, right? So that's the close. That's not the highest close, but it gets us where we really, if we can get a solid close. The high here was 182.94. This one was 183.02, right? Maybe you want to use something like that. Maybe the 183. Let's just say we can get over 183. We wanted to be entering. So I would use an entry bot and say if I can get above my 183. So let's go to NVIDIA, NVDA. And I'm not going to play this for earnings, but I may play it for just for this week, right? So they're going to come back in and move the chips. NVIDIA is going to move with it. So let's say 183, and we're not that far away from it. Oops, 183. And we're going to say, let's just buy an option. We're going to say, let's use the slightly in the monies, right? We'll use this week's options, and I'm going to do just a default price slicer. So it just gives me some edge on that. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. We'll say 50 seconds or so, 49. So now with me getting into that position, right, and basically saying if I get above 83, where would I want to roll? So this allows me, immediately gives me the ability to put in a template of something of my choosing, however I like to trade, whether I deal with it on the options value, the stock value. Now, for me, what I'm going to look at, I'm going to go back to the chart. I'll come back to the position and look for how I would trade this. Well, what's the all-time high on this? We're right there. That's 184.48. Again, are we going to see that and have a breakout here this week? I'm sure the traders that are getting ready for earnings. We'll love to see this thing print near the highs going into earnings, so this thing can really get rocking and rolling. So I think at minimum, if we can get up to that 184 area, I'd probably want to roll, even though it's $1. So let's call it 184.50, maybe 185. We want to do a roll, something like that. So let's go to positions, and I'll have NVIDIA in here. And then we'll create a template. So I'm going to use one of the recommended and see. So that's about $2 up. So let's just use this one right here. I'm going to do a quick hit trade that, again, for the week, I just want to make a little bit of VIG if the market's going to start to move up. So by doing that, what I did is I just put in two trades really, really quickly, right? So if we do get into the entry bot above the 183 area, I'm going to roll. I'm going to roll up if it gets up to 185, and then I'm going to trade out of it. It gets up to 182. I can add in stops. Again, I'm just showing you the example. I could add in another template that would give me stops and put everything in there. But just for example purposes, I'm just trying to show you guys how to get into these things quickly and give yourself an edge on that. Now, let's get back to Market Chameleon and look at a couple different things in here. Now, the other thing from a seasonality perspective, obviously NVIDIA is right at the top there. So that's a big advantage there in terms of seasonality. You can come here in terms of the active options with ideas. So NVIDIA is at the top of that list. Ones we've talked about, the IWM, still pretty hot. IBIT had a very big order flow today. It was a straddle the trade in the October, I think it was 40,000 contracts. So that's one that we were watching. Palantir was an anomaly. And that is one when you look at look, it's a big trader, right? You come into your unusual options. I can guarantee, Palantir is probably, maybe not from an unusual perspective. No, I don't see it on this list, but that 40,000 was a massive trade. PANW, TerraWolf was a big one today in terms of trading. You see the volume that was its normal volume. That's got to be on your radar there. That was having an explosive move as well. Wolf, they did a further expansion from Google investing. I think they went from something like either 8-10% to 14%. So, again, I think people are now looking at it and saying, well, they're not going to let, Google's not going to let them fail. So this has done pretty well in the stock. Again, it's already had a pretty good move on this. So some people may say it's already made its run and it's due for a pullback. So I probably wouldn't touch that in terms of, unless I really feel that Google's got something here and it's going to keep going. Right now, I don't see it with the red. Maybe you use something like an entry bot taking out highs or something like that, but something I would avoid at the moment. In terms of Novo Nordisk was hot today. That had news on one of their drugs. I guess it was the Wegovy being approved for liver problems. So that was a good sign there. So a lot of big names. UNH, this is from last week. We basically had Mr. Buffett coming in with Berkshire Hathaway and taking a big stake. Intel, the news there was that the current administration is considered taking a stake in the company. Obviously, that's a big deal. And then the volume just continues to be absolutely insane. And Open Door, again, stock's been doing pretty well in terms of movement. But a couple of the lingering ones down here, like a Trade Desk. Trade Desk had a massive gap, right? So let's just look at that on the chart real quick. That had a big gap down. This is another way that I like to look for trades where you feel like you're getting at least a little bit of a discount. So to me, this is one where, again, you're setting up with an island, where an island would be when you have a gap on either side of an area, and you can see the big gap over here and a very, very big gap in here. Now, I'm not a massive bull because I don't know the company that well, but I think when you see a chart like this and you could start to see momentum come back into it, I'd like to see more positive volume, right, where we can get some bullishness and people are starting to get excited about it. And I think you'll start to see that if we were to take out something like the high back here, right? That's going to get you excited. And then a double whammy would be taking out this high right here, because you have this big void, right? You have this big area of absolutely nothingness. So they're going to try to push this thing and get it back up at least to the low, maybe even to the consolidation area down in here around 67 and change. So I would say something like, you could be as aggressive as you want. You could take out today's high. You could take out this high. I really like the high back in here. It's a little far away. Again, let's just zoom in a little bit, give you some context so you can see these numbers a little bit better. but the high here, you're talking about roughly 57. We're currently trading 54. And a lot of you may say, look, I'd want to get in earlier. I want to get in now and use that as my first target. So then maybe use the high of the day, right? That high is 55.40 at the moment. So if you wanted to do that, take out the high, trade for this one, and then you set yourself up with another, $2, $3 move. So let's do that. Let's be a little more aggressive with it. Let's do an entry bot real quick, and we'll say the trade desk TTD, and look at the activity here. We'll say the high of the day was 54. I'm sorry, 50, 55. I'm gonna go cheat down here. And let me just look at that real quick again. The high was 50. Nope. And for some reason, I'm still in the video. Did I not click that? Sorry about that. There we go. That makes sense now. Sorry about that. So let's expand this again. And the high on this gap down is 55.40. I was correct. Okay, so let's do that. 55.40, and we'll add an option. And look, we may want to give this a little more time, right? Let this breathe a little bit more, because that big gap working in our favor. I have no problem jumping to 55s. I'd probably do it again with the default and let that breathe. So let that go, create. And again, we had the high and the previous high. So I think if we let this breathe for something like $3, and we got plenty of room to run. So just real quickly, you can see what I just did in seconds. I created 3 orders, right? Where not only did I create the entry bot to get into the trade, I created 2 rolls and an exit. So this is saying for every $3, I'm going to roll up. Now I can adjust that if I like something on the chart and I see resistance. Is the high back here, too close? That's trading 57, so that'd be only $1 and change. But 50, this one's up here is 60, right around that close. So maybe I want to use something like a 58. So I could go back into that position management, go back to my bots, and say for TTD, and that's down here. So again, just looking at a 1 lot TTD. If I said I don't like the first one, I want to modify that. I don't want it to be $3. I want it to be a little bit closer. So all I have to do is click and go edit. I can come back in here. I can do it a couple different ways. I can say if it is greater than, we said 57 and change, we could say something maybe like 58, right? Doesn't matter. We could pick a level and say at 58, I'm going to roll, right? And then the next one will build off of that. It'll go the next $3. So if I choose 58, then my next one will be $3 after that, and then my next one will be $3 after that. So I can go in and adjust to what I'm seeing in the market, or if I have stops, I can go put my stops in there as well and add them. If I just wanted to add something to this, all I have to do is create one down here. Like I want to put a stop in here. All I have to do is go and create a stop. So it could be something as let's use option value. It says if it goes value loss since inception of that option is 30%, I want to just get out of the trade and be done with it. So that would create a stop for me that if it were to move down below, well, I put it as $30, so that's not correct. I apologize. Let me adjust that. Edit. And I put it as $30. So let's do that. Should be, so if it drops by 30% in terms of the options value, then I would be out of that trade. So, that's something I encourage everyone to do in terms of their discipline. I think just being able to roll your options, lock in your profit is big for the discipline as well. So let's see if we can find one more that is a little bit more interesting. Let's do unusual volume and come down into here, see if there's anything that stands out. Sunrun was looking good. IQ, that's actually bearish, so that's interesting. But Roblox is, nope, sorry, IQ was bearish. Cypher mining, what we saw today in terms of mining, Tilray. Now these are very interesting. I'm not sure if I mentioned these last week, but Tilray, CGC, VFF, they all had really good volume last week. And this comes on the news of, or I should say more of the rumors that Trump was going to be talking about lowering the, I guess it's called the, I can't remember what the term is, the classification, I think it was, and lowering the classification of cannabis. And when you start to look at a couple of these stocks, they all had big moves. So Tilray started to move pretty good, pulling back a little bit today. We had CGC, which was in the works as well, CGC. So these are all names that are on my radar, waiting for some more follow-up. We bought some in terms of just stock, right? I'm not playing the options, but bought a little stock down in here. So, this, if they do make an announcement, we could get a nice pop out of these things. And then the last one was VFF. So just put these on your radar as names. Now, VFF, I think, was the best out of all of them. They actually closed higher today after gapping a little bit lower. And volume started to dry up a little bit, but still on the radar here. So this is one of the biggest and best. They actually made something like 300 million last quarter. So I think that's a very big name. And this one, you could probably use options if you wanted to. So that's in the cannabis space. There's always been a lot of rumors that this is going to change, but this is the first time that Trump's been associated with it. And I think it could happen. Again, there's a lot more guys that have stepped up this time and actually writing articles about it that, yeah, there's a lot more of the administration talking about it than we've had ever in the past, right? Where they're actually making a legit effort. Now, again, I think the war in Ukraine probably has a little bit more of the limelight at the moment versus passing cannabis or lowering the cannabis classification. So I think that's really where Trump today is going to be dominating the news of the next couple of days in terms of what's happening there.
And lowering the classification would just provide more markets for these companies, right? Basically.
So right now, there's, if you think about it, I don't know what the exact number is. I think it's somewhere 40-50% of the states actually have the ability for you to buy cannabis in the state. And it would give, what I have read is that it would actually allow banks and give banks kind of that ability to say, okay, we can do business with these guys, and then they can have credit. It allows the businesses to do a lot more and allow them to use the credit cards to really get to the next level as a business. So I think it would really, really help in terms of bringing some, I guess you could say, validity to the market, right? In terms of bringing this to the next level. So, I mean, they're talking about even just on hype, and let alone what I think you could hear from, like, all the meme stocks, right? What we saw out of that, there was really no substance behind them. Here, these are like legit businesses that have been really heavily shorted. And you get any of these short squeezes going, I think those could be very, very interesting, right? So a couple of the names in that space that have had some big rumors. So I think those are, I don't want to put really any trades in there because they are very expensive in terms of the option prices to the stock. I think when you get in that high implied volatility scenarios, you're probably almost just better off buying the stock.
Yeah, we did actually have one question popped up from Ann, and it was, why are there no trade ideas for common stock trading, just options? And I told him in the thread that from a Market Chameleon standpoint, we're mostly an options-based research platform, so that's why most of the ideas are for options. But I guess maybe you could answer, Ann, why you would maybe use options more in this trade you're talking about than just going out and buying the outright stock. And of course, when you're on the short side, buying a put or doing a credit spread that gets you a bullish lean, that's something in options that typically for most people is easier than trying to short the stock, right? So
100%. Yeah. And I mean, for everything I've taught the last 20 years when I've been actually helping people with their portfolios, and once people start to gravitate towards options and understand options and the power and the leverage that you get, it's a whole new world, right? It's just one of those things where you're like, I can control the same stock for 1/10 of the price, right? And that is really something very interesting. And again, I don't know where the education level is in terms of investments and options, and so there may be some time, effort, energy to spend on investing and learning some of why an options is as powerful it is. And again, I appreciate them coming in and asking the question. So, but yeah, I mean, like, if you're, to me, when you look at something like this specific industry, the options really don't make sense. I prefer buying the stock in something like this because not only is the stock cheap, all of those stocks are cheap, and the options are very, very expensive. So in that scenario, that's when I like buying the stock and selling the options, right? So I buy it and then sell something against it if there was enough premium in them. And that helps you kind of finance everything. So that would be, a very good, kind of entryway. Again, I don't know what kind of stocks, I didn't catch the name. I apologize, but
It was Ann.
And so, yeah, if Ann is, looks at some of the lower price stocks, or if you like some of the bigger names, the problem with some of the bigger names is a lot of the stuff is overbought, right? And, do you want to own the stock? Let's say, for example, let's go back to NVIDIA, right? Do you want to own the most expensive stock in the history of the world in NVIDIA, right? It's over a $4 trillion company. And, again, that stock, it's, some would say it's fairly priced, and that's okay, right? That's fine. I'm not making that argument, but it's the most expensive stock we've ever had in the history of the stock market, right? Because of where this is, how it's got inflated, and the belief that this is the biggest name and what have you. But you go back to 2000, you go back to 2008, a lot of these names get ruined, right? They get absolutely destroyed once competition comes in. AMD slowly trying to climb up and compete with them on the big server sides, right? In terms of, bringing that to the table, but they're nowhere near the valuation of NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA's got this thing down, and they're a cash cow. Not even Apple with all their money, or Microsoft with where they're at, is anywhere near NVIDIA in terms of valuation right now. So, am I a buyer of at the top of the stock market? No, but am I willing to play the options when we're up here and we can continue to make highs? Yes, I think it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot, I would say it's less risky in terms of, getting yourself in trouble, right? And that's what I'd be more concerned with, is that I go buy a $500 stock in Microsoft versus buying an option for $10, $15, $20. Yeah, maybe 5,000, or it would be actually depending how much you buy, but depending the comparative, I'm only, using 20% of the capital versus, 100%. So, it comes back to risk and understanding your risk associated with it.
Yeah, and it's Microsoft's a $500 stock, and I mean, it's a strong company, but right now it's like a 38 PE, right? Almost a 40 PE. So it's historically, you're paying a lot for those earnings, right? You're paying a lot for those earnings.
100%.
All right, Ryan, another great show. Thanks for putting this on for the Chameleon community and everyone who joined us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so we will see Ryan next Monday. And for those who don't know, Ryan was involved in a bunch of different things, but he and his partner, that product he was showing us that allows you to manage your trades when you're not involved. You put in the parameters and it manages them for you. It's called OptionsRobot. And that's Ryan's creation and his technology, and it's a very, very good tool. So, Ryan, thanks for bringing that to the trading community. And we will see you next week, my friend.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right. You have a great night, buddy. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Remember, thumbs up on all the social platforms. Follow us on YouTube, and a big thumbs up on YouTube if you're following us there. Join us next Monday with Ryan, where he'll bring more ideas and go over some of the ideas he talked about today. With that, everyone have a good night. And please, if you can, join Dimitri and I. Our next live show will be Wednesday morning. Tomorrow we'll post a new webinar that's pre-recorded. But with that, everyone have a great night and a safe trading day tomorrow. Bye.